Great leaders understand that livable communities yield thriving economies, and this month, ICMA is recognizing the vital role that local government leaders play in addressing critical issues in their communities to create better outcomes for their residents. Joining us for today's Member Spotlight is a leader who is doing just that, Jasmine Chan, Project Manager of the General Plan Update for Tucson, Arizona. During her time with Tucson, Jasmine has supported numerous public outreach processes as a thought partner and facilitator, including park master planning, accessory dwelling unit code amendment, historical asset prioritization and preservation, and currently as the project manager for the city's general plan update. Her philosophy on livable communities is that each person has their own individual and changing needs for livability, and local government can better serve its constituents by making the time and space needed for these important conversations. Thanks so much for stopping by today, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me.
Now, it's important to note that I only shared a fraction of what you're involved in, so let's give the audience a better idea of what you're all about. Can you share what the highlight of your career has been thus far?
Yeah, so my career so far has been fairly short and fast. So I started in local government about 4 years ago and have worked in a lot of different project areas. I would say related to the historical asset prioritization that you mentioned earlier, Jesse, and that's related to a local fort. It's called Old Fort Lowell, and it's an area that was occupied by the U.S. military in the mid 1800s. And then even before that, it was occupied by the Hohokam Native Americans who lived there thousands of years ago. It's kind of at this really special place in Tucson where different washes and different kind of waterways come to meet, so very fertile land there. Um, and so getting the opportunity to work with the different neighbors that are in that area, as well as historic preservation advocates, to understand how to preserve what is left of the fort materials there, as well as to interpret what else has been happening on this particular space in Tucson, Arizona. So what we did was we convened a working group over a year and a half to kind of talk about what are the different goals that are related to the city, not only the city's goals, but also our community's goals for how do we represent um, what has happened, what kind of information we want to be able to provide, and how do we move forward with making sure that this area is something that can get maintained well, so that we're not in the same boat where we have to wait until we have millions of dollars available in order to make meaningful impact into kind of what is currently there.
Now, those are some major career highlights, especially while still being so green in your career. But I imagine those highlights have come coupled with some challenges of their own. So, can you also describe a challenge you faced in your career and how you were able to overcome it?
Yeah, I will say for how much I highlighted the work at Fort Lowell, it was also a really big challenge for me. I've never worked in historic preservation before. I've never worked closely with, that was the first time I worked closely with neighborhoods and with kind of our operational parks and recreation staff, because Fort Lowell is also a park that the city of Tucson maintains. It was very challenging for me to navigate the kind of interpersonal dynamics, as well as the formal, like what is required from our historic preservation office, what are kind of the standards we need to adhere to, what is the timeline for our processes, and all of that. Um, and I remember I went to my supervisor, who at the time was the assistant city manager. Um, he said, I said, hey, like, I feel so unprepared. I feel like I'm the worst person for this job. I feel like every meeting we go to and that I hold, I'm always very worried about what's going to happen. That I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I'm going to promise something incorrectly. Um, and really, I would credit his leadership and really the leadership here at the city of Tucson and being one that's very supportive of learning new things. And he said, we'll make sure you have the resources so that you know who to talk to and that you can reach out to them whenever you need support. You're still going to have to do the work. right? You don't get to not do it. Um, but you do have like here are all the ways that we have people who can support this effort that you're putting forward, and to be able to understand how to navigate these different dynamics between different people. So I would say the whole process was rife with um, feeling like an imposter, feeling like I didn't have the tools, but also, opened my eyes to the many different ways that the staff here at Tucson are very willing to jump in and help you learn what to do, um, and to support you along the way.
Wow, what an undertaking. And that imposter syndrome feeling is so relatable, especially when you care so much about the work you're doing. I know I've felt it a lot throughout my career as well. But I'm glad that the city leadership was able to guide and support you through that. And you were able to both see the project through and see some great success from it as well. So, today we're highlighting how local governments can enhance the quality of life for their communities by addressing critical issues such as climate change, housing, aging infrastructure, and economic development. Now, you definitely touched on this when we were talking about your career highlights, but with being the project manager behind the general plan update for your community, can you share more about this project and how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. So our general plan update um, is in a very kind of interesting moment in time at Tucson, because there are many plans that have been recently adopted by our mayor and council that talk about climate change, talk about housing, talk about economic development. We're hearing all these plans are great, but like, how do they talk to each other, right? Like, how are all of these issues that are so interrelated going to actually come together from the city of Tucson's perspective? And that's a question that we get to answer through the general plan update. What are the goals? What are the policies that are coming out of these recent planning efforts? How do they compare to our 2013 general plan? And what needs to change as we move forward, right? So leaning very heavily on the work that has happened already, in order to then spring forward into where we need to go for kind of the present moment.
Wow, so many changes for the city and for your career, but this has to be such an exciting time and such a great opportunity to make both a big and lasting impact. It'll definitely be a challenge, but I have no doubt you'll be able to handle it. And what advice do you have for other local government leaders who are looking to make a more positive impact on their residents' quality of life?
Citywide positive impact is very hard to achieve, but always remembering that change happens one person at a time. So being able to impact the way one person views their relationship to the city of Tucson, right? Can you change that to be one that is more of trust and respect than one maybe of distrust and, of kind of skepticism, because we see a lot of that in city of Tucson, and I've heard a lot of that in many other communities as well. Relationship building takes a very long time to get to a place of trust, and then you're in relationship maintaining, right? And that's also its own kind of set of requirements as well.
Lots of time and intentionality, that's for sure. Jasmine, it's been a true pleasure to learn more about your experience and what you're doing for your community and for the profession as a whole. It takes people like you to really make a difference, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share with us today.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For more information on this topic, you can look to ICMA's June issue of PM Magazine on livable communities, as well as ICMA's Local Government Reimagined Conference in Long Beach, California, under the topic area of placemaking at the local level, livable communities, thriving economies. That will be from June 7th through the 9th. Those and other resources will be linked in the description below, and to view more member spotlights, be sure to subscribe to our channel.